Before getting into invasive species in Florida, it's probably a good thing to understand a little bit about our natural history and some of the events that happened in Florida. In the mid-30s, 1930s, most of Florida was forested. Forests like this one here were all timbered. They cut all the trees down, and this right now is a wildlife management area, but at one time the trees were all cut, and this is regrowth. But what happens when you change the habitat, you're always going to change something with species. This forest has been maintained very well, and the animals are doing well here. They survived a lot of the timbering back in the 30s, but a lot of Florida, the majority of it, was changed. My grandfather had some farmland in Central Florida, and in the 40s, during the war, World War II, the government wanted to improve the land by cutting the pine trees, it was called improved pasture, making it pasture lands for farming, dairy farms, agriculture, groves, anything to improve the land for human consumption. Well, they really didn't take consideration any of environment then at that time. It wasn't something that I think that humans thought was important. What was more important to them was their own survival, money, and making a way of life through farming, agriculture, etc. Well, now Florida's starting to pay for it. There's so much construction going on that things are really changing fast, and you cannot bring back species once they're gone from an area. They just don't appear and come out of nowhere. And there's no adjacent areas for them to also move back into areas. And once they're destroyed, changed, and disturbed, most of the animals can't come back because the environment is not what they need to live. As you drive through Florida, especially North Florida, you'll see lots of forest. But take a look at those forests really closely, and you'll notice that the pine trees are all the same height, and they're planted in lines. So it's pines and lines. You'll see them. And these forests grow for so many years, and then they're cut again. So most of Florida right now is tree farm instead of beautiful forests like this that were once a part of the ecosystem here. We have so many species now that are on the endangered list, species of concern, and on the rare snake registry, along with other amphibians that are also ready to decline to be extinct, like flatwood salamanders and Apalachicola. I just hope that somehow the right people start seeing what's going on and try to make some type of adjustments and changes to stop this. Because once certain species are gone, they just don't appear again. They don't come out of the sky. It doesn't rain them. They don't come out from under the ground. Once things are bulldozed and completely destroyed. Construction like this is happening all over Florida. They bulldoze the whole habitat with nothing left. Everything gets bulldozed. Whatever's here dies. The animals, if they even go into the adjacent habitat, is probably not very good, and it's not their natural ecosystem. If they tried to come back in after the houses were put in, they would perish. They will put retention ponds in here, which will just breed invasive animals. The ponds will breed cane toads, Cuban tree frogs. They have invasive fish like tilapia. So the only thing that really comes back as far as amphibians and reptiles into the communities that are built now are the invasives. They withstand the change where our natural species don't. Florida is basically turning into the Galapagos Islands, being repopulated by other invasive species. It's something that's going to happen. It's not going to change. In 1960, the population of Florida was 5 million. Today, 22 million. With 22 million people living in Florida, something had to have given. And our natural species that were here for centuries are going. They're diminishing, their habitat's gone. When their habitat's gone, they cannot survive. So, invasive species may be our future. Let's take a look at two invasive species that do very well in Florida now. Daniel's going to talk about them.
So what I've got here is a really cool critter, actually. This is a marine toad, also known as a cane toad. Now this is considered an invasive non-native species in Florida. They were actually reportedly introduced to help control cane beetles that attacked sugarcane crops in South Florida. Unfortunately, the beetles crawl all over the stalk of the sugarcane, and this toad stays pretty close to the ground. So maybe not the best control, but it is a toad that has caused some controversy, and you'll hear people saying a lot of nasty things about. They've invaded a lot of the peninsula of Florida. They're most common still in South Florida, but you'll see them in areas of Central and North Florida now. They get quite a bit bigger than this. This one is just about half the size that they can get to. Now, these actually are quite toxic. You can see these parotid glands here, these big glands behind the eyes. Those secrete a poison. Now, I would have to rub it in my eyes or ingest it for it to really have an effect. Me just holding the toad here, I'm in no danger. They have caused problems with pets. That toxin's been known to kill dogs, but that's still in rare cases. Not every dog that touches or licks one of these toads is going to end up dead, but you should be careful with your pets around these toads. Now, you will see recommendations with these and Cuban tree frogs, both non-native species that have invaded Florida. You'll see recommendations on the FWC or University of Florida websites telling people to kill them. I would have to disagree with that a little bit. Yes, it is a non-native species that's not technically supposed to be here, but what I've seen is that a lot of people misidentify these. They confuse them with our native southern toads. And a lot of times when people post any kind of toad or frog online, people all jump in and say, oh, that's an invasive, that's a cane toad, or that's a Cuban tree frog, you should kill it. And I've been seeing a lot of native frogs that people are being told to kill. So I would recommend to you that you are, as a citizen, have no responsibility to kill animals yourself. If you're not a biologist, you're not a veterinarian, you're not an expert in euthanasia or humane methods of euthanasia, I don't think you should be pressured to kill frogs and toads, or any animals for that matter. These are really cool, impressive animals, and they're just trying to make it through life like all the rest of us. They've been very successful. They've invaded many areas. Their native range is anywhere from South Texas all the way down into South America. But, you know, they're just trying to keep on living and keeping on making babies like all other animals, and they've been more successful than a lot of other animals. So I don't have any hatred for these toads specifically. They actually make really cool pets. I would say if you have one as a pet, please don't release it into the wild. You don't want to start new populations. but it's not something to be afraid of. These are not demons, they're just another animal. They're not supernatural creatures, and sometimes we treat invasive species like they're some kind of supernatural villain. Now, after handling any toad or frog, I would recommend washing your hands. It's not even secreting its toxin now. If it was, you would see like a white, milky secretion around those parotid glands, but you still should wash your hands. So there it is. That's the biggest true toad in the world, the marine toad or cane toad. This is a Cuban tree frog. This is probably one of the most common and villainized invasive non-native species that we have in Florida. We don't actually know exactly how they got here or when they got here. They've been at least in the Keys for just about as long as biologists have been taking note of the reptiles and amphibians in that area. We know that they were there by at least the early 20th century. They are native to Cuba, but Cuba is very close to Florida, so there's even a possibility of a natural invasion or a natural migration where some floated over on debris. But they also could have come over attached to boats. As you see, they climb up walls and they travel around wherever people are carrying stuff, whether it's boxes of fruit or on boats or vehicles or anything. The reason I'm wearing gloves is because this frog has kind of a nasty secretion. You definitely don't want to rub your eyes, especially after handling this frog. But it is a really cool tree frog. They get big. They can get about baseball size. They get bigger than this. And one of my favorite books on wildlife of the Florida Keys, Skip Lizell, the author, I think called them charming animals. But a lot of people would disagree with that now. They do eat other frogs sometimes. They'll eat just about anything small enough to put in their mouth. But they're also eaten by many native animals. They're eaten by a lot of snakes and also birds, the same kind of predators that would eat our native tree frogs. They do grow quite a bit bigger than most of our native tree frogs. Now, you will see Cuban tree frogs posted on social media a lot, and the reaction is usually for people to say, kill that, it's an invasive species. And you'll see references to or recommendations to killing these frogs and marine toads on the FWC website or University of Florida website. I would just have to add that I don't think anybody who's not a veterinarian or a biologist should really have a responsibility for killing animals. Most people can't identify these properly. A lot of people have trouble telling these apart from native frogs. So I'd be very careful of just killing any frog that people on social media are telling you to kill because it's invasive. You don't want to kill native frogs or toads just because you're trying to kill invasive ones. Now, one thing that's important to know that if you do kill these frogs, you're likely not having any impact on the population. They breed in huge choruses of sometimes hundreds or thousands of frogs and lay thousands and thousands of eggs. They're explosive breeders, so in big storms, you'll hear lots of them calling, and there's not really much you can do about it. They're here to stay, and picking them off one at a time isn't going to really do anything. We've done roadkill studies where we found thousands of these hit on roads, and the tree frogs seem to be just as common as they ever were. So even with the cars hitting them over and over. So you're not going to really have much impact on the population just by killing the ones that end up on your house or anything like that. So they're quite variable in color. This one's actually changed to a lighter color just as I've been handling it here. When we started filming, it was a dark brown, and it's turning almost a more light brown or tan color. Sometimes they'll look almost white, especially when they're on light colored walls at night. You'll see them on the walls of buildings, houses, around lights, because lights attract bugs. So these frogs will come to eat the bugs. That's kind of why we're standing here in front of a camper. It's almost like this frog's natural habitat. You can see why they're such great climbers. They have these big toe pads. So they have these really big suction cups on the end of their toes that help them to stick to walls or the leaves on plants. And that's how they climb up the walls of buildings a lot of times. These frogs aren't especially cold tolerant. Actually, when we get really cold winters, a lot of them die, especially if there are freezes. But usually still enough are left over to continue breeding and start the population again. But that's why you see a lot more of these in South Florida, and they become less and less densely populated as you go further north in Florida. But the less that we have cold winters for the future, the more of these frogs will probably have as the winters get warmer and warmer. So there you have it, the marine toad and the Cuban tree frog, two of Florida's most villainized invasive species. They're just trying to make their way in the world. It's not really their fault they're here. They're just trying to do their thing. It's unfortunate that Florida has so few natural habitats left. There's not much habitat left for our native species, so we shouldn't be surprised when we have non-native species that find a way to survive in areas where there are lots of people, which both of these amphibians can. They like to live around houses. They like to live in disturbed areas that a lot of our native animals don't choose to live in. So as Florida wrecks more and more of its natural habitats, we should expect non-native species to come in and fill those niches that might have been filled by native species.
As YouTube content creators, I challenge the herpers out there who make YouTube videos on herping and chasing herps and finding snakes. I challenge you to do a video on your state, your area, on the ecology there. What's going on with the species? I know every state in this country has endangered species. What's being done to them? What's being done to help them? In Florida, we have pythons that we're pouring all this resources to get rid of, but what are they doing for the indigo snake here? What is being done to the species that are on the endangered list? Concern. We see so much going into getting rid of invasive species that we're not looking at what really needs to be done to protect our native species. They're going faster, and the invasive species are taking over. Habitat is the most important thing now. Protecting animals does nothing if they have no environment and ecosystem to live in. It's elementary. So I challenge you YouTubers who do herp videos, who do birding videos, who do outdoor videos, fishing, etc. Make a video and talk about this so people can understand what's really going on. There's got to be better ways. Let's just hope for the future of our kids and their kids that they can see some of this, or our videos may be the last source of seeing some of these animals. I hope not.